This episode is brought to you by Roundtable Group, the experts on experts. We've been connecting attorneys with experts for over 25 years. Find out more at roundtablegroup.com.
Welcome to Discussions at the Roundtable. I'm your host, Noah Ballmer, and today I'm excited to welcome Dr. John Stanton to the show. He is the professor of food marketing at St. Joseph's University and a sought-after expert witness in food marketing and product development, advertising, sales, and sales management. Professor Stanton is both the European Retail Association and private label manufacturers respective halls of fame. He's a frequent conference speaker, and he holds a Ph.D. in Quantitative Methods and Marketing from St. Joseph's University. Dr. Stanton, thank you so much for joining me here today at the Roundtable.
My pleasure to be here.
Let's jump into it. You've been in food marketing since it looks like the early 1970s. How did you first get into expert witnessing?
I had been in food marketing, as you said, having consulted with Campbell Soup for quite a few years. And we got a call from some lawyers that were representing the state of Pennsylvania. And my colleague and I had absolutely no idea what it meant to be an expert witness, but they said they were going to pay us. So we said, it's a good idea.
Fair enough. Since
that time, I think I learned quite a bit about being an expert witness. The first time I did it, though, I was really undergunned in terms of what the other side had and what they knew and what was going on. And it was really an interesting learning experience for me.
Do you think that it is a failing on the part of the attorney to not adequately prepare newer expert witnesses in those sorts of situations? To what extent does the expert witness need to take it upon themselves to be ready, and how much of that is the engaging attorney's responsibility?
Well, I think the attorneys generally do a pretty good job. I think also, since I've done about 50 cases, they feel less obligation to spend time. In the beginning, I think they spent time with the most basic things. It's some of the subtleties that are the things that you can only learn, I think, through experience. A good example of that would be the recognition that the opposing attorneys don't really hate you. that their job is to discredit you. And you cannot, under any circumstance, take that personally. It's kind of like now, I feel like, well, that's their job. And my job is to answer the question and not get angry or not get upset. Just listen to the question and answer the question. Understand that's their job. I think they could tell the newer, I should say, expert witnesses about that. But until you're in that environment, it's tough.
Let's talk about those situations a little bit. Does this typically come up in something like a Dobert hearing, or is it in the depositions, or even during cross-examination? What are the situations in which expert witnesses find themselves impeached vis-a-vis their expertise?
Sure. I find the worst case scenario is in the deposition itself. The attorney that you're with really can't object. You have to answer all the questions. And when you get into trial, I mean, if you can't change any of these things from that deposition position. So you really have to be super careful there. I remember a case, I think I said the company should have. And the attorney, with all of their activity, what do you mean? What? And they read from the transcript of the deposition. And in there, I said, could have. And, which is it, Dr. Stanton? Is it should or could. Do you have any idea what it is you're talking? I mean, just the traditional stuff. But so you really have to be careful.
So I assume this also comes up in rebuttal reports from time to time when you write an expert witness report and then they come back saying, no, his expert witness report is wrong for these reasons. Do they usually try to impeach your logic, or are they trying to impeach you as an expert?
Mostly, I have found the logic because I think my background is pretty secure in that regard. So it's mostly the logic. I had recently a situation where I had to do some forecasting, and I thought I did a pretty good job. And in this case, the jury rejected that whole position. And I came back and said, how could they do that? It made no sense. Um, Once you get to a jury, you got no idea what's going to happen.
How do you go about connecting with juries when you are in front of a jury? Do you have techniques that you find help you kind of make a connection with them, either through body language or through perhaps something like visual aids?
Two things. I try to just be the average Joe. I try not to appear like a highfalutin expert that's coming in to set the the situation straight, etc. I try to use basic language and to just be one of the guys. I have a style with, I'm probably giving this away, but I have a style with the opposing attorneys where I try and be a nice guy. Always say, sir. Always say, I'm sorry, sir. Could you repeat that again? I don't mean to be. I mean, I try to be as polite as I can be to the other attorney.
Under heavy cross examination, how do you go about maintaining that polite, stoic demeanor?
It's my job. It's before I face the guy, I literally say, look, he doesn't hate you. I mean, his job is to rip you to shreds. And your job is to continue smiling and answer his questions. I mean, any expert, in my opinion, that loses his temper probably shouldn't be an expert. That's the job, is to maintain. And I've lost my temper on a couple of occasions. I remember one time it was involved with international food marketing, and the opposing attorney says, Dr. Stanton, you're not even in international marketing, are you? And I said, yes, I am. I mean, I've lived in 4 different countries. I taught food marketing in these countries. I teach international marketing, food marketing, And he says, well, on the website, you're not listed as one of the people teaching international food marketing. I said, well, I don't care what the school says. I mean, I don't even know what they have on their website. And he kept it up. And I said, look, raising my temper. I said, look, I'm leaving here and going back to the university and teach international food marketing tonight. The attorney next to me just kind of under the table, patted me on the leg. Take it easy,
Sure.
But it just, I don't know what it was, but it just kind of bugged me that he kept on it after I thought I made it clear.
Yeah, it's interesting. You bring up your experience in an international role. Have you worked as an expert witness in international venues as well?
Not in venues, but court cases in this country that involve business in other countries.
Oh, interesting.
Which, by the way, it's kind of funny. This case that I just referred to involved Germany, and their expert witness spoke fluent German. So the attorney says to me, the way he always talked, so Dr. Stan, you don't even speak German, do you? I said, well, I get along a little bit in German. And he says, well, can you tell me the word for apple pie? And I said, Apfelkuchen. He picked about the only word I knew. Well, if he asked just about any other word, I wouldn't have known it, but I knew apple pie. Which when he heard it, he immediately stopped asking me that line of questioning.
Do you find that you have to do when you're working, like you said, not necessarily an international venue, but on a case that involves, international concerns? Is there a significant amount of outside research that you have to do for that? Or in fact, any other cases where you're handed your materials from the engaging attorney and it doesn't quite cover everything, and you find yourself needing to do a significant amount of supplementary research to do your report or to perform in a deposition?
That's a really good question for a newer person. I found that I always have to do some additional research. The materials that your attorney gives you are in the best interest of your attorney. And so it's good to make sure you know all the issues, not just the issues that they select. And of course, related to that is you also need to make sure that this is a topic that you can represent well for your client. If you're uncomfortable with what they're saying, don't do it, because it will come out in the deposition. They'll nail you on it, and it's just best, to forego that opportunity.
That brings us to kind of the vetting process. When you're on those phone calls, you get a call that they need an expert witness. What is the calculus that goes on in determining whether or not you're going to take the case? Now, obviously, the first among them will be, am I in fact an expert in this area? But beyond that, how do you decide whether or not you're going to accept an engagement?
Do I believe that this person has been harmed, or this company has been harmed by the behavior of the other company? That's number one. Then number two is, does it appear that I have the background to be able to opine on that?
As an academic, do you feel that that has helped prepare you for a lot of the expert witness work that you do? Not only the subject matter, but the way that you engage with people and juries and judges. Do you find that it has affected your temperament when you're in court?
I think that anybody that has a job where they have to stand in front of a group of people talking, whether it's lecturing students or doing some other, type of work, that it helps you. Just being comfortable in that regard. Yeah, I think it helps quite a bit. I think if you publish a fair amount, which I do, you have more experience in how to do the research to follow. I also think I have access to a lot of material online from the university. So yeah, I think it does. I think the big thing is, since this isn't my primary source of income, I'm much more willing to be frank and honest with the client if they decide they don't want me to do it, or I don't want to do it. It's not a major financial stream lost, like, how am I going to pay the rent this month, etc. So I think it helps a lot in that regard, that it isn't my primary income source.
For expert witnesses who aren't necessarily in the career of their expertise, in other words, you're a professor rather than working for an advertising agency, how do you keep up to date on your own knowledge? What and more generally, how can expert witnesses in those situations, because there are a fair number of academics, what strategies can you employ to make sure that you are up to date and well versed in the most current goings on of your niche?
It's one of the positives that I believe I have with the client is that as a food marketer, I publish both, academic articles. Do you know what an academic article is? I mean, it's an article that no one reads. Uh, but I've I've also written a number of books, but I stay pertinent in the field of food marketing. I go to, the National Grocers Association meetings. I go to the Food Marketing Institute meetings, and I believe that I stay reasonably pertinent, to the field of food marketing.
As somebody who is well published, do you have any concerns about having something that you said offhanded in a book somewhere? Maybe you wrote it 30 years ago, that maybe you've changed your mind about, or maybe it just wasn't, it was out of context, something like that. With such a large body of work, how do you maintain a library of knowledge in your head about everything that you've ever said?
I mean, that's a good question. And there have been a couple of occasions, generally speaking, uh, I have pretty good recollection of what I thought at that time. And I probably haven't changed my mind on many of those things. But I would say that there are times when I'd say, geez, what did I write about that? I mean, because I know the other side's going to find it. But to be honest with you, I'm pretty clear on what was my beliefs about these various topics over time.
Sure. As somebody who's has been at this for quite a while now, have you seen any changes in the field? Anything significant that is different from when you first got started in expert witnessing compared to now? For example, technology, maybe things like Zoom.
Oh yeah, geez, the main thing is being able to have documents delivered on
Hmm. Interesting.
uh, in days of yore. I would get 4 or 5 boxes delivered to my house, of materials to read. Now it's all delivered online. That's a major thing for me. And another change is you always had to go someplace else to be deposed, whereas now you can be deposed uh, like you and I are.
Sure. Do you find that it's different in any kind of a fundamental way when you're online rather than face to face? Do you have to consider your demeanor or what you're wearing or how good your webcam is or anything like that?
It's the opposite. I believe that part of what I've done well is an actor,
Mm,
and I believe that a lot of you know, and another thing, a lot of the things like that. I dress nicely, so you know, I don't think that people get to see what I look like enough. So I prefer to be there in person. Of course, I prefer to teach in person. That puts me in the minority already. But
sure.
but for me personally, I like to do it in person. And I know it's a big cost savings, and I understand that. I'm happy to do it any way they want. You know.
Do you have a story or two about any cases? Obviously, you don't have to go into any specific details of the cases that changed the way that you go about expert witnessing fundamentally, or reinforced a behavior or position that you take on expert witnessing?
And there was a case involving two privately held companies that the presidents were just at each other. And when I looked at the case, uh, I said to myself, "What are these guys arguing about? I mean, this should have been settled in a minute and a half." One of the things, for example, was the other side uh, claimed that our client had released proprietary information. We said, but it was in a national advertisement. You can't you can't call something proprietary that's in a national ad. So there were a lot of these little things. And I realized that it really wasn't about the law. These two guys didn't like each other. And they were just, and I have so many cases like that, you have to realize that these people are fighting over nothing. You know, in many of the cases, it was really two millionaires fighting about, $200. And you just take that for what it is. Try not, you don't make judgments about whether it makes sense that they do these things. I've asked to do a job. I've asked to offer an opinion. I make it clear on some of the cases. It's not that I would have a conflict, but I might have known people in the other companies, etc. And I'd make it clear I'm offering an opinion on this point. I'm not making a judgment of whether you're right or wrong or not in terms of the court case.
Yeah.
A specific thing actually was a supermarket. It had to do with a zoning case. And I was offering an opinion on whether I thought something was within the zoning rules or not within the zoning rules. But I made it clear that I wasn't making any judgment of how good or how bad either of the two supermarkets were. I will tell you one funny story.
Go for it.
I was in a court case, and the judge, I'm now being in the stand testifying, and the judge says, "Look, we're going to finish this by 5:00, or I'll finish it at 5:00 because I got to get a plane. I'm going to Brazil. I have to get through customs, etc. You figure out how to get me through customs quicker. We can stay longer." Well, I knew. I'm sitting. I didn't know what to do. And I looked over at the judge and I said, "Your Honor, you can get what's called the despasanchi. It's a person that does gets you all through customs and does everything for you."
Sure.
And so he talks with me about that for a couple minutes. And I didn't know whether I should do it or not, but he said, as if anyone knows, I used to live in Brazil. So after that guy protected me like, the other side would do this. And he said, "Look, get out of here. You're not going to answer that question." And, when I told him how to get through customs, and he treated me after that like the golden boy.
That's great. That's great. Those are the little things that expert witnesses talk about when they talk about what they get out of being an expert witness personally. And along those lines, what do you find meaningful? What do you find important about being an expert witness?
First of all, because I'm also a university professor, I bring real examples that I know take place without revealing, obviously, anything that I shouldn't reveal. I teach a class in food marketing research, and I tell the class, I said, "Listen, not one example that we're going to talk about this semester will be out of a book. Every example will be something that I personally worked on." And you do that to try and establish credibility with your students.
Sure, and I'm sure that it humanizes you. Out to talk about things that take place outside of the classroom. I always liked professors that use personal stories as well. Back when I was in law school 100 years ago. Along those lines, speaking of relationships, what makes for a good expert attorney relationship? What are the factors that lead to a an engagement that's not only productive but also leaves you feeling good and has the attorney calling you when they need another expert such as yourself?
Honesty. I feel like the opposing attorney has to be honest with what the real situation. There is a tendency on the attorneys to not reveal too much about what else they have going in this case, etc. But the more honest they can be, the more I appreciate doing the work. And on my part, I want to find the attorney receptive to what I'm saying, and trust that I can be honest with them. I do find, like, one of the very first questions I ask an attorney when we're talking is our conversation protected? In some states, it's not protected at all. Everything that you produce, everything you talk about, they can get. In other states, an expert is equivalent to a client. I like to find that out, because what I wouldn't want to do is not be entirely honest with the courts. I mean,
Right.
if I said, maybe you should have done this, and the other side says, did you ever tell them that wasn't, even though it was just the two of us in the conversation, I would be uncomfortable not being totally above board with that. So I'm really careful when I find out it isn't protected.
That's an interesting point. Do you feel that expert witnesses should take a proactive approach in finding out those little, small but important, the legal ramifications of what they say and do, or is it incumbent upon the expert witness to educate themselves on those things?
I've found that the attorneys are pretty good at telling you what are these things that would be affecting your, like they would say, this is based on a case where the judge said you have to meet these 5 conditions. They usually tell you that kind of stuff.
Sure.
What they don't often do is give you the full picture of what it is that the case is about. They ask you to offer an opinion on this point, but you don't really know how they're intending to put that point in a bigger case.
Sure. Dr. Stanton, with a lot of cases moving towards settlement these days, I've had experts tell me more often than not, or the great majority even sometimes, of their cases are moving to settlement. Does that change the way that you go about billing?
Between you and the 250,000 people who listen to this.
Millions.
Millions.
Yes.
I hardly ever even read a contract.
No kidding.
Yeah. I believe that my fees are well below the market. I basically charge by the hour. If they say we're not going to court, okay. It's the advantage of having another source of it. I just did a case that probably my fee was totally in the vicinity of $25,000 for the whole case. The opposing expert, and you know this for fact because you asked the other side how much was $500,000, and I thought maybe I should raise my rates. But I'm probably not a good one to offer financial kind of information because I really don't care.
Well, fair enough.
I want to get paid for an hour's work when I put an hour in. I mean, I'm not saying I do this for free, but it's just the way I was taught. My father always told me you do a day's worth for a day's salary. He worked hard, and I'm very comfortable with everything I've ever made with any of the clients. Although one time a group asked me in the middle, just about at the end of getting ready to go to trial. They said, "Listen, can you do a taste test for us? And I said, well, we can't do a taste test. We only have like 2 weeks left. And no, we got to have it. I said, let me tell you what's going to happen. If we do a taste test in 2 weeks, there's going to be something we overlook, something that the other side is going to be able to pick upon. It's just, we understand that, but we go into deposition, and the guy goes after my taste test, and there was something he picked apart, and he wasn't right about this, but it had to do with the number of different types of people in the taste test. I said, I didn't want too many students. I followed all the basic rules. Well, my attorneys got back and said, we're not even going to go to court on this. We think you blew the thing. I didn't blow it, but I said we're going to find something they're going to attack, and we had to be ready for that. They didn't pay me.
Oh, wow.
They didn't pay me. And I said to myself, you don't sue lawyers. I mean, they could keep you tied up. They're paying nothing, and we're paying money. And the second thing use it as a learning experience. I should not have done the case when I said, you really can't do a perfect case in 2 weeks.
Right.
I'll never do that. I'll just tell them, find someone else.
Wow.
Yeah.
A learning experience. And every expert witness has had these sorts of negative experiences. Anyone who's been doing it for a significant amount of time anyway. And I find that most expert witnesses, as you say, take it on the chin and turn it into a learning experience. And now our listeners can learn from your experience. Before we wrap up, do you have any last advice for expert witnesses, and in particular, newer expert witnesses?
Well, it's what I said in the very beginning, which is you can't take this stuff personally. I do know some people. I know one guy was an expert witness, and he walked out of the deposition. He couldn't take it. I mean, he just couldn't take it. I know some of the beginning people think they're 100% right. They can't imagine that someone could ever have a different opinion. But I think that the main thing that I had to struggle with in the beginning was understanding that these other attorneys don't hate you. It's their job. You have your job. They have their job. That's what I think was the most important thing.
Absolutely. Sage advice. Dr. Stanton, thank you so much for joining me here today at the Roundtable.
It's my pleasure.
And thank you to our listeners for joining me for another discussion at the Roundtable. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to our podcast, Discussions at Roundtable. Our show notes are available on our website, roundtablegroup.com. Subscribe today on Apple Podcasts or your favorite listening apps.